Women of Reddit share their craziest stories. Story 1. I've got a buddy, Marine guy. Tough as nails, loves the gym, tells dad jokes he thinks are funny. Great guy. Been friends for about 3 years. Then there's his wife. Let's call her Elle. She's quiet, shy, and somehow manages to radiate sweetness every time she smiles. You know the type, soft-spoken, always polite, and completely unaware she's magnetic. Now, I've joked with him before that I had a tiny bit of a crush on her. And he always laughed it off, probably because he thought I was kidding. But between us? Yeah, totally wasn't. Anyway, my buddy and his wife had been talking about pushing her out of her comfort zone. Nothing wild, just things that'd boost her confidence and give her a little spark outside of everyday life. And recently, he told me they'd tried a small, very tame adventure together that had her blushing for a week straight. Apparently, it worked because she wanted to try something a little bolder next time. So one night, I got a text, the kind you don't expect. The plan was simple. They'd go out for drinks, loosen up, then maybe, just maybe, swing by a place that allowed for, shall we say, interactive curiosity. I showed up first, nerves buzzing, heart pounding, wondering what exactly I was getting myself into. The air in that little hidden spot felt thick, like anticipation had its own soundtrack playing in the background. Then, I heard my buddy's unmistakable voice through the thin wall between us, all calm and guiding, like a director on set. Her soft laughter followed, and my pulse jumped. Let's just say that what happened next was a mix of adrenaline, disbelief, and pure surrealism. It wasn't about what actually happened, but about the crazy fact that it was happening. By the time it was over, I left that building walking sideways, partly from nerves, partly from shock, knowing I'd officially lived through the strangest, most thrilling story I could never tell at Sunday brunch. Story 2. We were only 3 days into marriage, and already the glow of the wedding had started to dull under 15 straight hours of travel. Love may conquer all, but it didn't prepare either of us for airport security queues and cramped seats over the Atlantic. By the time we emerged from the labyrinth of customs, trains, and taxis, the streets of Paris shimmered under the afternoon sun. The city looked dreamlike, maybe from exhaustion, maybe from beauty, and either way we were too tired to decide which. Our hotel stood tucked in a narrow street of the Latin Quarter, its carved stone balconies overlooking a bustle of cafes and bookshops. The concierge greeted us with an accent smooth enough to make butter jealous. We smiled, tried to look civilized after a day of travel, and made our way up to the room. Millie took the elevator. I took the stairs, dragging our luggage like a penitent traveler. When I reached our floor, she was waiting, tapping her foot and pretending to glare. "What took you so long?" she teased. "I would have been here sooner if someone hadn't packed for a 6-month expedition," I said. Her laughter broke through our fatigue. It was ridiculous, really. We were married, in Paris, and trying not to pick at each other like overtired children. But underneath the bickering, affection was there, steady and certain. Inside, the room was small but charming, a wrought iron balcony, crisp linens, and a faint scent of lavender from the hall. Parisian simplicity at its best. I collapsed on the bed like a man returning from war. Millie stood by the window, gazing out with that look that meant she was already half planning which cafe we'd stop at first. "Come on, we should go explore before dinner," she said, glancing back. "I would," I mumbled into the pillow, "if I hadn't lost all will to live somewhere between Heathrow and the metro." She sighed dramatically. "You're hopeless." "I'm married," I countered. "That's kind of the same thing." She threw a pillow at me, then laughed, which softened everything. That sound, it was impossible to stay irritated when she laughed like that, full and light. A moment later, I felt the bed shift. She'd climbed in next to me. Her fingers traced along my chest before she whispered, "We should probably clean up. I'm going to shower." The words hung in the room, playful, suggestive. Then she added with a grin, "Unless you'd rather nap through Paris." The bathroom door clicked shut, followed by the rhythm of running water. Somewhere between weariness and reflex, I got up to join her. Steam filled the room, curling around the edges of the mirror. She stood beneath the warm spray, her silhouette blurred by mist. I slipped in quietly. She turned, amused. "So you did decide to join me." "Couldn't let you have all the hot water," I said. It wasn't really about the water, though. The shower became a reset button. The travel grime washed off, the tension between us dissolving as easily as the soap. There was laughter again, light and teasing. Her fingers brushed down my shoulders, over my arms, pausing just long enough to make the moment feel electric. Not overt, not explicit, just alive. Paris was supposed to do that to people. Maybe it was finally working. When we stepped out, The city light poured through the curtains in soft orange streaks. Millie wrapped herself in one of the hotel's oversized robes and sat by the window, toweling her hair. "We should go see the Eiffel Tower at night," she said, squinting at a small map. I joined her, drawn by the scent of her shampoo and the quiet between her words. "Isn't it a little touristy?" "So what? We're tourists," she said, leaning into me. "It's Paris. You're supposed to see it all glowing." And maybe she was right. Maybe the point wasn't to chase the untold corners, but to let the clichés happen, to hold hands on narrow streets, kiss under old street lamps, and share a dessert too fancy to pronounce. That evening, as dusk settled, we found ourselves walking aimlessly along the Seine. The bridges shimmered in gold, and every turn offered another postcard view. We didn't talk much, just walked, occasionally brushing against each other, fingers grazing before finally intertwining. It wasn't the loud kind of romance, it was the quiet kind that sneaks up when you stop trying so hard. We ended the night with a small dinner near the hotel, a table barely large enough for 2 glasses of wine and a plate of bread. Millie laughed about our travel blunders, about how my French accent made strangers wince in sympathy, and about how we were both learning how to be married, how to be gentle even when tired. When we finally returned to our room, the city was quiet outside. From the balcony, we could see the moon suspended above the rooftops, pale and perfect. Millie stepped behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist, and rested her chin on my shoulder. "I think I'm starting to like being stuck with you," she murmured. Her warmth pressed against my back, the scent of her hair mixing with the faint Paris air, something sweet and elusive. I turned to face her, brushing a stray strand from her cheek. "Starting to?" She smiled. "Well, you did make me carry my bag once." "A mortal sin," I said, mock serious. "An unforgivable one." She was laughing, but her voice softened as she leaned closer. The kiss that followed wasn't about passion so much as peace, the kind that comes after long days and short tempers, when love feels real again because you've earned it through sheer persistence. When we finally pulled away, the city hum drifted back in, distant traffic, a singer somewhere on the street below, the occasional burst of chatter. Paris had started to feel alive, not just around us, but between us. Millie reached for my hand again. "Come to bed," she whispered. And so I did, not because of desire, though that flickered too, warm and steady, but because the bed felt like a finish line. We slipped beneath the white sheets, skin against skin, more comfortable now in our quiet than any words could make us. The sounds outside faded. She fell asleep first, her breathing even, hand resting against my chest. I lay awake a while longer, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, hearing the faint echo of the city that never fully goes silent. I really did love my wife, I thought. Even when she drove me insane. Even when she talked me into another adventure, before I was ready. Especially then. Story 3. You know those stories that sound way too absurd to be real? Yeah, this is one of them. It all started about 2 years ago, when my brother-in-law and I stumbled into one of the strangest discoveries 2 family members could ever make. And trust me, it changed the way we've looked at Sunday dinners ever since. So for a bit of context, my wife and her sister are very close. Same jokes, same mannerisms, sometimes even the same wardrobe. It's like they were produced by the same factory, just 1 year apart. Naturally, my brother-in-law and I got along too. We shared similar humor, the same taste in obscure sports documentaries, and apparently a very similar taste in Reddit communities. Back then, my wife had this confident streak going. After a few years of marriage, she'd gotten into fitness and body positivity, and she genuinely liked hearing compliments about how she looked. She even suggested posting a few photos online. Nothing wild, nothing recognizable, just tastefully flattering stuff. And yes, I had her blessing to do it. So one night, I made a post on a local subreddit, known for its ahem appreciation of confident adults. I uploaded a cropped photo of her, artistic lighting, no face, nothing that could give away who she was. The comments were kind, a few were a bit cheeky, and overall it was harmless fun. Then I got a message. A private one. It was from someone who complimented the post and wanted to trade. He said he had a similar arrangement with his wife and thought it could be fun to exchange photos and keep things anonymous. Now, in hindsight, that was probably the moment where fate was laughing in the background, waiting for the twist. But at the time it felt harmless, even thrilling. We started chatting off and on over a couple of days. Our photos stayed subtle and anonymous, no faces, no names. Just 2 guys having a bit of private mischief. We even joked about what life would be like if our wives ever found out, and we laughed it off every time. Looking back, we might have gotten too comfortable with that joke. Our messages turned playful, filled with teasing and imagination. It was weirdly easy, two strangers talking casually about how much they adored their partners, wrapped up in this secret digital banter. I never suspected a thing. Then one night, he sent a new photo. His message was something like, "Just took this one, probably my favorite so far." It was a striking photo, his wife, stretched across a neatly made bed, soft light falling through a window. Totally PG by online standards, but still suggestive enough that I instantly knew it would get attention. I was about to reply when something caught my eye, a small, familiar detail sitting near the edge of the frame. A stuffed monkey. Now, that might sound random, but my wife's sister owns that exact one, a childhood keepsake their dad gave her when she was little. She never travels without it. I'd seen it countless times, sitting on her nightstand when we'd visit. In that moment, my brain processed about 6 thoughts at once. That's a stuffed animal. That stuffed animal belongs to my sister-in-law. Which means, oh no, I need to confirm this right now. Heart racing, I typed. Hey, just curious, your wife's name wouldn't happen to be Martha, would it? Not her real name. There was a long pause. Then a simple reply. Yes, why? And that's when I told him. Another pause. A beat. Then both of us, at the exact same time, sent the same message. Oh no. We talked it out the next day, half horrified, half unable to stop laughing. The universe really went out of its way to serve us both a plate of awkward irony. Because of course, out of all the couples in the world, it had to be us. After some serious reflection, and an unspoken agreement never to speak of that subreddit again, we decided to keep it our little secret. No harm done, no damage carried forward, just two red-faced brothers-in-law who had accidentally outsmarted themselves. Now family gatherings are interesting. Every once in a while, I'll catch him stealing a quick glance toward my wife, and I know he recognizes her from certain anonymous shadows. Then again, I'm just as guilty of noticing familiar features in his wife that I can't unsee. We've both learned the fine art of pretending everything's normal, while sharing a secret only possible in the age of the internet. Through it all, we've managed to laugh about it, quietly, discreetly, and only when no one else is listening. Our wives remain blissfully unaware, and honestly, that's exactly how it should stay. Every time I scroll Reddit now, I think twice before clicking post. Sometimes I even wonder if fate has a wicked sense of humor, or maybe just a very sharp one. Either way, that stuffed monkey will forever haunt me. Story 4. Halloween parties have a particular kind of magic. Something about the costumes, the music, the low lights, and the faint sense that anything could happen. Ours was no exception. Almost everyone came dressed in matching outfits that year, every couple trying to one-up the next. My wife and I went all in as Deadpool and Lady Deadpool, full spandex and all. The costumes were, well, let's just say they didn't leave much to the imagination. We laughed about it on the way in, joking that the party was about to see way more superhero than anyone asked for. The house looked incredible, fog machines spilling mist over the walkway, orange lights glowing from behind cobweb-draped bushes, and people already in full costume mode, music pulsing through the walls. Within minutes, I'd lost track of my wife somewhere between the snack table and the costume contest, and I ended up chatting with a group of friends near the bar. About 30 minutes in, one of the hosts found me. Now, the hosts were a couple everyone loved, effortlessly cool, well-traveled, always throwing the kind of dinners that made you wonder if they'd missed their calling as lifestyle influencers. They were that polished couple, the kind that makes you question if they ever have a bad angle. So when one of them, dressed in full body paint as some kind of galaxy-themed goddess, spotted me and shouted, "There you are hiding!" the room tilted for a moment. The body paint looked more like art than a costume. She was glowing, literally, with all the glitter and shimmer, and it took me a breath longer than I'd like to admit to answer. We started talking. She had that flirtatious charm that lived somewhere between confidence and chaos. As the drinks kept flowing, the conversation loosened. We joked about our costumes, about how ridiculous spandex was, and how Halloween always seemed to blur lines. Somewhere between stories and laughter, I realized how magnetic her presence was, how easy it was to get lost in it. As the night went on, so did the teasing. A glance that lingered a little too long. A laugh that came with a touch on the arm that lasted a beat longer than necessary. It was playful, intoxicating, and just the slightest bit dangerous. The kind of energy that buzzes in the air but never quite crosses a line, at least not yet. She leaned in close at one point, her perfume, something warm and floral, cutting through the smell of pumpkin candles and spiced cider. "You really pull off that suit," she said, eyes glinting. "Though maybe a size up next time." She laughed as I tried to come up with a clever reply, but all that came out was a half chuckle. Somewhere in the background, the music shifted, a slow pulse beneath the chatter. She tilted her head, smiling. "You're quiet now. That's usually not a good sign." "It's been a long night," I said. She replied, eyes sliding toward me again. "Or maybe it's just getting interesting." We wandered toward the back of the house, still talking. The garage door was open slightly, moonlight spilling across the floor. The air was cooler, quieter, and far too private. I told myself we were just getting some space from the noise, but deep down I knew this scene was heading into trickier territory. She leaned against the edge of a workbench, smiling that knowing smile. "You know," she said softly, "Halloween always brings out people's hidden sides. Something about pretending to be someone else. Sometimes it just shows who we really are." There was a silence between us. Not awkward, not uncomfortable, just charged. The kind of silence that says more than conversation ever could. Her eyes studied mine, as if daring me to say something, to move, to do something. I didn't. I just stood there, caught in the gravity of that moment. The pulsing of the music outside was faint now, muffled by walls, sounding like a distant heartbeat. Finally, she stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin through the paint and glitter. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You probably shouldn't look at me like that," she teased. "Someone might get ideas." I smiled. Maybe they already did. Story 6. It started with a message that looked so simple it almost felt innocent. "Can you give me a ride home tomorrow? My car's in the shop, and my boyfriend's out of town." I stared at it longer than I should have. My first thought wasn't about the ride. It was about her tone, the teasing warmth that always seemed to hide under her words. Mia had that kind of energy that could make even the most harmless sentence sound like an invitation. I told myself it was nothing. Just a ride, I thought. Still, my pulse reacted like it didn't believe me. I typed back, trying to sound casual. "If I'm not off too early, sure." Her reply came a minute later. "Thanks." That one word lingered in my head long after I put my phone down. The next day dragged on endlessly. I couldn't focus at work. Every email felt longer, every meeting slower. She was around the office somewhere, doing her thing, but it felt like she existed in a different orbit, close enough to notice, far enough to miss. When service finally ended and the building started clearing out, I stayed behind, pretending to scroll through my phone. Across the room, she walked in, hair tied up, bag on her shoulder, a little tired, a little too radiant for the fluorescent lights. "I've just got to send the reports and we can go," she said. I nodded, probably too fast. It was just a ride, I told myself again. People give rides all the time. Except my palms were sweating, and my head was full of what-ifs. We got in my car. The city outside was quieter than usual, the kind of silence that invites thoughts you shouldn't have. Music played low, something chill, forgettable. We didn't talk much, and yet the quiet felt full. There's a specific kind of silence between two people who know they could say something dangerous if they really tried. When we pulled up to her apartment complex, she pointed toward the front. "Just park by the main building. Those spots are for overnight guests." The word overnight stuck in the air longer than necessary. She got out, turned back, rolling her eyes with a mock impatience. "Let's go, come on." I followed, maybe curiosity, maybe gravity. Up the stairs, through a short hallway, door unlocked with a soft click. She tossed her purse to the side, turned, one hand on her hip. Her look said 1,000 things, and none of them were, "Thank you for the ride." She didn't speak. She just studied me, eyes dark with something playful, daring. Then she exhaled and said, "Stay here," disappearing into the next room. The sound of running water filled the silence, the shower. I sat down on the edge of the couch, every logical part of me screaming that this was a bad idea, and every other part ignoring it completely. A few endless minutes later, her voice called out softly through the door. "Come in." The bedroom light was dim, filtered through a half-drawn curtain. Steam drifted faintly from the open bathroom door. She was there, on the bed, wrapped in nothing but shadows and confidence. The air between us seemed to hum. Every movement felt slower, like we'd both stepped into another rhythm. She looked at me, not with words, not with expectation, but with something rawer. The kind of look that tells you what someone feels before they say a thing. I moved closer. My voice sounded strange to my own ears when I finally spoke. "You're breaking a lot of rules right now." She smiled, small and knowing. Maybe that's the point. The rest of that night felt like a memory before it even finished. The way music sounds when you're half dreaming, the way lightning looks through closed eyes. Nothing rushed, nothing frantic, just this slow, unbearable closeness that made breathing something I had to remember to do. Every detail burned itself into my mind. The smell of her shampoo, the way her hair clung to her shoulder, the taste of laughter mixed with nervous tension. The room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of heartbeats that didn't belong to just one person anymore. After a while, the world outside disappeared completely. By the time I left, the sun hadn't risen yet. Morning sat just below the horizon, painting the city in faint silver. She walked me to the door, hair still wet, wrapped in a towel like nothing unusual had happened. But her eyes, they told a different story. "Thanks for the ride," she whispered. Her tone carried every secret hidden behind those words. I nodded, not trusting my voice to stay steady. The door closed softly, leaving me in the cool early light, wondering whether the night had been real or just a vivid dream I'd willed into existence. On my phone later, a message waited from her. "Hope you made it home safe. Let's not make things weird, okay?" And somehow, that was exactly what made it weirder, because no matter how hard I tried, I knew that ride home would replay in my head for a long, long time. Story 7. Some nights out start innocent, and end as stories you're never quite sure how to tell. This one began with nothing more than drinks after work. My husband and I at a crowded bar on a Friday, the kind of night that hums with laughter and clinking glasses. We were halfway through our second round when he spotted one of his co-workers, Mark, leaning against the counter, already mid-story, already charming whoever would listen. Mark had brought his partner, Jess, and within 5 minutes we were all squeezed around a high table, trading stories and ordering another round. Mark was exactly the kind of man who never turned off that charm. Good-looking in a polished, slightly self-impressed way, always talking with his hands, laughing a little too loud. Jess was his opposite, calm, radiating that quiet confidence that doesn't need an audience. I liked her instantly. An hour in, things got louder. Mark began drifting toward the younger crowd by the bar, tossing smiles like confetti. I caught Jess watching him, not hurt exactly, just done. That mix of frustration and practiced endurance couples get when the same argument has happened too many times. "I'm so sick of him sometimes," she muttered into her drink, voice low and tired. "Always performing." I smiled sympathetically. "Don't react," I said, half joking but half plotting. "Maybe there's a way to even the score a little." Her eyes narrowed in amusement. "Oh, you've got an idea?" "Not yet," I replied, "but give me time and another glass of wine." The idea didn't come from planning. It came from the laughter that followed, from the teasing, from how easy it was to turn irritation into mischief. Mark stumbled back over at one point, full of swagger and half-finished cocktails, boasting about something none of us believed. Jess rolled her eyes. I could practically hear her patience cracking. That's when she said it, something about a lesson. That's when I grinned and said, "Well then, maybe tonight's the night." Later, after too many rounds and too much bravado, the conversation turned to bets. Silly things at first: who could throw darts more accurately, who could chug faster, who could name the song playing before the first chorus hit. But Mark's competitive streak had no brakes. So when Jess teased him about losing, he puffed his chest and asked, "What? You don't think I've got what it takes?" "Careful," I said, smiling into my glass. "She might call you on that." And because the universe has a sense of humor, he did exactly that, challenged, bragged, promised that if anyone dared to bet against him, they'd regret it. The table erupted into playful banter, exaggerated wagers flying around with the sugary confidence that only tequila produces. Finally, Jess leaned across to me and murmured, "Still want to teach him a lesson?" "Oh, absolutely," I said almost too quickly. Cut to an hour later. The four of us piled into a cab, still laughing, navigating the blurred line between boldness and recklessness. The air outside was warm, the ride short, and none of us quite ready for the night to end. Mark was convinced whatever this bet was, he'd come out victorious. Jess just smiled like someone who already knew the ending. Back at their place, the atmosphere shifted. The music softened. The laughter thinned into something quieter, charged, curious. The game had turned into something else, and everyone knew it. "So," Mark said, leaning back in his chair, still convinced the world revolved around his confidence, "who's ready to settle this?" Jess looked at me, eyes sparkling. "Oh, it's already settled." Mark blinked, realizing too late that he was outmatched, not by strength or charm, but by wit. Jess stood, smooth and sure, moving with that controlled grace that only comes when someone's finally in charge of their own story. She didn't need to raise her voice. All she had to do was smile. The room fell quiet. For the next few minutes, it wasn't about bets, it wasn't about competition, it was about shifting power. Watching someone who'd always had the upper hand realize they were no longer holding the cards. Jess played her role beautifully. I played my part too. My husband, let's just say, he was a very content bystander. There was laughter again by the end, not the loud, bragging kind from earlier, but the breathless, knowing laughter of people tangled up in something they'll never fully explain to anyone else. Mark sat speechless. Jess glowed as if she'd finally exhaled years of frustration. When we eventually said our goodbyes, there were no apologies, no awkward excuses. Just quiet smiles and an understanding that sometimes people get precisely what they've earned, delivered with elegance, mystery, and a little poetic justice. In the cab on the way home, my husband caught my hand and whispered, "That was something." I laughed softly, still watching the city lights flicker by. Every now and then, I said, the best lessons are taught without saying a word. Story 8. We just left a friend's house party. One of those nights where laughter comes easily, the music runs late, and the drinks sneak up on you. My wife and I came home with my best friend and his wife, just 4 people who'd known each other too long and trusted each other a little too much. The kind of friendship that flirts harmlessly around boundaries until everyone's wondering if they're still jokes. The ride back was full of banter, playful, reckless talk that only happens when you've all had a few. There were side glances, teasing comments, even a few inside jokes that didn't feel very inside anymore. By the time we stepped into our living room, the energy had shifted, lighter, bolder, a little electric. It started subtly. The girls disappeared down the hall, whispering and giggling like co-conspirators. We thought they were just freshening up, but minutes passed, and the silence stretched. My friend and I sat on opposite sides of the couch, pretending not to notice that we were both listening for footsteps. Finally we heard them, the unmistakable rhythm of heels on hardwood. When they came back, nothing about the night felt ordinary anymore. They were dressed to kill, confident, radiant to wear. Their laughter sounded different now, lower and slower, as if they knew exactly what signal they were sending. And then, without a single word, they crossed the room, not to their own husbands, but to the others. The world tilted just slightly. There were no instructions, no plan, just an unspoken understanding that sometimes rules are meant to be rewritten. From that moment on, everything felt cinematic, warm lighting, quiet music humming from the speakers, and the weight of anticipation hanging thicker than the air itself. My friend's wife, Alex, was all calm fire, the kind of woman who knows what effect she has and isn't shy about it. She carried herself like confidence made flesh, a knowing smile, a teasing touch to my shoulder as she passed. I realized instantly that she'd planned this, or at least hoped for it. Maybe we all had. Across the room, my wife was already deep in conversation with my friend Johnny, the kind of conversation that involves barely any words. There was laughter, then silence, then the sound of footsteps heading down the hall and a door closing softly behind them. That was when I felt Alex's hand find mine. She didn't say a thing, just led me toward the couch. Every step was deliberate, slow, the kind of moment where the temperature of the entire room seems to change. There was a softness in how she looked at me, not unfamiliar, not forced. Just pure permission. A quiet exchange of you can if you want to. What followed wasn't wild or frantic. It was slower, more intimate than I could have prepared for. Nothing about it felt hurried or uncertain. It was 2 people discovering curiosity without guilt, hearing their own breathing grow louder in a room that suddenly felt much too small. Outside the cracked door, laughter drifted from somewhere down the hall, the sound of 2 other people caught in their own version of the same moment. Somehow, knowing they were there only heightened everything, like we were all part of one long, unspoken confession. After, the house was silent in that content, dizzy way that follows a night too charged to explain. Alex excused herself quietly, and not long after, my wife appeared, damp hair, glowing skin, that mischievous expression that said more than any words could. She gave me a small wink before disappearing toward the shower. When she came back out, still smiling, we didn't say anything at all. Some nights don't need explanations, just slow breaths and the steady rhythm of 2 people finding each other again. Later, when the door closed behind our friends, everything became quiet and real once more. I pulled her close, the same woman I'd always known but somehow knew again, and kissed her like we'd just relearned the map of each other. There was no guilt, no overthinking, just connection, raw, dizzying, honest. The morning light made everything feel gentle again. No awkwardness, no regret. Just a shared secret humming like a private song between four people who had stepped a little outside the lines and come back changed. Story 9. Every great wedding has at least one story people wouldn't believe if they weren't there. Ours just happened to involve my best friend, a woman who once knew me better than anyone else. Sarah and I met in college, the kind of instant sparks that burn hot and fast. We dated for a while, drifted apart, and somehow circled back as best friends. Over the years, we'd become whatever exists past exes, and before something else. No awkwardness, no jealousy. Just a thread of history that never really snapped. She's breathtaking. Tall, golden hair, eyes so blue they almost distract you mid-sentence. The kind of woman who always looks like she belongs on the cover of a magazine. But for me, she was just Sarah, my rock, my partner in crime, and occasionally the person who helped me remember I was still alive. When I got engaged, there was never any question who would stand beside me. Instead of a best man, I asked Sarah to be my best woman. My wife thought it was perfect. The two of them clicked from the start, similar humor, same wild streak, both too confident to feel threatened by each other. It surprised people, sure. But that was the beauty of it. Everyone in our circle understood our story without needing the details. The wedding itself felt like a movie. The ceremony, the vows, the music swelling at just the right time, all of it pure magic. I remember catching Sarah's eye as I said, "I do," and she gave me that small smile that said, "I'm proud of you, idiot." It grounded me. By the end of the night, when the guests had danced themselves into exhaustion and the lights had softened, it was just the three of us, my new wife, my best woman, and me. The energy had shifted again. The tension that had always hummed quietly beneath our friendship floated to the surface, impossible to ignore. It wasn't messy or confusing. It was just us. A strange kind of electricity built over years of trust and understanding and unspoken what-ifs.